All right. Well, welcome everyone tonight. This call is about the nitty-gritty details of high school. We talked the other night about kind of tips for the transition to middle school and high school and how those kids really do need to be, I don't want to say treated differently, but accommodated because they are different and they're growing in independence and having all the emotional change. And so we talked about lots of great tips on that call, but tonight will be more of the mom side of things, credits and testing and enrolling and graduation and all those things that people always ask when they're like, you're going to homeschool high school? But before we dive into all that, let's begin in prayer. I have a short prayer here for our children's vocation, and as they head through high school, that is certainly something we should pray for. So we begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Lord Jesus, you have entrusted these children to our keeping. They are growing older now and must soon decide upon a future state of life. Please help them and help us to help our children to make the decisions you want. We would be very proud and happy if you called them to make a complete consecration of their lives to you, but you know what is best. And whatever are your designs for their lives, just let our children know them and grant us all the needed grace to follow them. Amen. So, homeschooling high school, I wanted to say upfront that this is one of those decisions that most families make totally separate from just the decision to homeschool. Like deciding to homeschool is one thing, but high school does have a unique needs, unique expectations, unique requirements, and so it's a completely different step in the discernment. I know that when I was discerning homeschooling and whether we would homeschool, there was that consideration. Maybe high school would be the time to put our kids in some kind of school, whether that be private, public, whatever. We discerned that was not best for our family and for our kids. But then I also had to discern, do I want to enroll them in a program that would have all their coursework laid out and have other teachers, and I would be just kind of directing their education. And that's an excellent option as well for various families. I actually, for years, thought that's what we were going to do when my oldest got to high school, that we would choose a program and dive in and stick with it. And so in her 8th grade year, we started kind of in the spring. I already was very familiar with all the options, but in the spring we started, she and I sat down and started looking through some of them and kind of trying to figure out which one would fit her learning and our needs best. And we would narrow it down, and then we'd flip-flop, and then we'd keep moving. And we prayed about it a lot because that's super important, right, in all these decisions. And we did finally just come to the realization that we had been homeschooling for, at that time, officially 10 years, because she did a double year. And we had always just done our own thing and figured out curriculum, so why would we change what was working? And so that's where we came to in prayer, that if it was working, there was no need to change it. I also took into consideration that she was not super excited about college and is not a highly academic, I want to be top of my class and, be an astronaut or anything like that. So for us, that was the decision that we made. My second child is a boy and very opposite of his sister in all ways. And we also discerned to go ahead and keep doing what was working for him with our family and just pull together our own curriculum. He, however, is very fixated on getting into a specific school and a specific degree plan, which is very competitive. And so I do have those two kind of ends of the spectrum. And I don't foresee my daughter doing college or 4 years of college necessarily right away. She may do community college, she may take a gap year or work or something, but she is not like on that track. So given all of that, I wanted to give you my background and then say that you do have to discern which direction you're heading, and you do have to kind of pick something well enough in advance that you can get there. And I know Mimi's probably going to say this, but even in early middle school, or at least at the middle of middle school, you've got to kind of start to figure out what track kids are mostly headed on, so that you can plan out the sequence of courses, especially like math and science and history. And then the other thing to consider that I think is important in this stage is to not block off any option to your child. So even if you have a child that's like, there's no way I'm going to college, don't worry about math, I'm not going to college, but they're in 7th grade or 8th grade or even maybe 9th grade. That's where we as parents need to step in and say, that's a long time from now. That's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now. And I do not want to close any doors for you. So we do our best. The advice I got was to prepare them for all options early on, so that when we got to our junior year, if they all of a sudden decided, oh yes, I want to go to Harvard, not that that was entirely reasonable, but we could at least figure out what else we needed to do, and we weren't so far behind that it was an impossible thing to attain. That was a bad example. But you know what I mean. So those are the things I wanted to say, is that I think that we all have to kind of go into this with a lot of discernment and a lot of mothering and guiding. You are your kid's guidance counselor. Remember all the things that your high school guidance counselor did? Like, that's on the parents when you homeschool. And I feel like even if you're enrolled in a program, they do some of the work, but you still have a big hand in helping them figure out all those things. So that said, I know that Mimi wanted to share with us kind of what she's learned and her wisdom, so I'm going to let her jump in. But as you guys think of questions, like I said, drop those in the chat and we will definitely do that and talk more. Mimi?
Hello, ladies. Okay, so a little bit of background just for those of you that that are on the call and that. So I have 5 children. My oldest will be 20 next month. She's going to be a junior at Benedictine College in the fall. And then I have a 17-year-old who will be 18 in August, who had like a double year as well. So she's actually going into her senior year. We wanted her to be the oldest in the class, not the youngest in the class. The beauty of homeschooling. And thank you, Jesus, with everything that's going on. She is not a senior this year. So she'll be a senior next year. And then I have a rising 9th grader who's 14, a rising 7th grader who's 12, and a rising 2nd grader, Ignacio. I'm going to be a professional by the time he comes around. So I, like Jenny, my top 2 are giving me 2 totally different experiences. But I'm going to talk a little bit about general high school stuff that I've learned along the way that have been so helpful that I wish somebody had told me when I had a 5th or 6th grader. And then I'll go into specifics. So generally, we have to remember that the reality of our education at home, especially for high school, needs to be started with what your state expects. So each state is going to expect a very different thing. And this is when I suggest that if you have not belonged to your state educational, whatever, for us it's FPEA, Florida Parent Educators Association, your state program, your state support group for homeschooling, high school is a great time to plug into that. This is also where I would highly, highly recommend HSLDA. Because as homeschoolers, we, in many ways, have a strike against us when it comes to the government type of stuff. So it's important that we want to back ourselves up with that. So first of all, your state. So each state is going to require a different thing. I can only speak to Florida state requirements in that in Florida, the state, even if the kids go to public school, does not issue a diploma. The diploma is issued from the school. So that means that I will be issuing a diploma for my child when I see fit that she is ready to graduate. In the state of Florida, we do not have specific credits that need to happen. So again, this is extremely important that you plug into your organization or talk to somebody that's already been through the high school transcript issue for your state. We literally do not have a state requirement of classes. So we have that. So you start with your state. Then the second thing that you're going to think about too when you're starting with high school is there's a very big difference between when you're starting with high school and your child took traditional school classes and then you're pulling them out. Like Jane, I think that was that we were talking about, something like that. Because then you're going to do and you're going to look at something very differently than if you're building Selena in 5th grade. What am I going to do with my big kids? Because I'm picking them there. So there's a reality of what we, because we went to traditional school, think of as a high school curriculum, okay? We have biases because we went to traditional school. We have thoughts, and when we go to, especially if we're eclectic, picking up our own homeschooling, even if you're using a program for the most part, and then like adding and changing and doing something like that, we kind of think of a framework of high school. Okay, they're going to do 4 years of English, and then they're going to do 4 years of science, and then they're going to do. So that is your first kind of step when you start to go do the high school curriculum. So like, how are you going to build that? How that path is going to be built. So think of it as a framework, and the framework, like Jenny said, I am a big proponent about the fact that you need to start thinking about high school in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And this is why. In 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, you are setting up, especially when it comes to history, science, and math, you are setting up what credits they're going to get in high school. Most states, the framework will allow you some 8th grade classes to count for high school. So there's a lot of things that go into like the asterisk for the transcript. Jenny and I were just talking about this because I've got one kid that I want to collect one thing from here or whatever. But when you talk about creating a path, then you're saying, okay, so if I create the path in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that means that in 9th grade, they are set up to take these 4 classes in high school. Okay, so traditionally, and if your child is college bound, even in the least, you need to think of high school as the 4 years preceding the year they plan on applying to college. Okay, so for some reason, it needs to be literally, like in the transcript, the years. So, 2016 to 2017, 2017 to 2018, 2018 to 2019, 2019 to 2020. At no point do they're not going to analyze the idea of, well, they took this one, they were technically 8th graders, or they were technically a 10th grader. You just need to have a framework where they have 4 years of material, okay? So think of that when you go to put a framework. Now, general credit things. Number 1, high school credit hours in most traditional sense needs to cover between 170 to 180 hours of work. Okay. That doesn't mean that you are teaching 170 to 180 hours of work. Okay. But think of it broken down in about 180 hours, 80 days in a school year. And each subject takes about an hour a day. Okay. Some days it's going to take 80 minutes. Some days it's going to take 40 minutes. But a traditional credit will cover between 70 to 80 hours. A lab needs to cover a third of that. So if you're going to give a credit for a lab, it needs to be around 60 hours. Again, think of it with the breaking down of the days. That means that you get 1 lab day per week. Okay, so it makes sense. It's just a way that they kind of break down the traditional school. That traditional school setting then, can be applied to how we do it. Okay, so that's one way to make it a high school credit. The other way is that they are 75% done of a high school textbook. Okay, let's break that apart. 75% means they don't have to finish the book, and it needs to be a high school textbook. And a high school textbook is what you deem is a high school textbook. Okay, so for some of our children, that high school textbook is going to be a really cool book on seeds from the library. I just did this with my child that just finished botany, okay? For some of our children, it will be the NASA instruction manual, okay? But 75% of a high school textbook, that is considered a credit, one full credit. Okay, so then how does that break down into semesters? We have to be very aware of how we break down things when it comes to high school credits, because when we want whatever we do to be put into their transcript. So we just had this conversation. You cannot give your high school freshman 2 years of English in high school, in freshman year. It's going to be a massive red flag. Any university is going to be like, hello, what's this? So don't make your high school freshmen do 2 credits of English. So that means that if they're doing 2 books of literature in the fall, then they're doing writing in the spring, and they don't have to break down the same hours. Remember, they're doing 180 hours of English. That's it. Now, you can give them an honors course. So you can give them a course if you want to give them English 1 honors. Okay, that's an extra 20 to 40 hours of work. 20 to 40 hours of work is the general guideline for what would be considered an honors course. You also have to add 10 more hours of lab. So again, if your child is very strong in math and is doing Algebra 1 in 8th grade, and it finishes Algebra 1 in 8th grade and wants to continue on for calculus, that's fine. You just need to think in your mind, he's done 9th grade math, now we're moving into 10th grade math for that credit, okay? So again, I'm just doing like generalizations. Now the difference between a numbered grade and a letter grade. So most transcripts, and I'm going to say most because you can't remember, this is in your court. The way that you write your transcript is according to your state, and if your state doesn't have any laws, according to how you feel that you need to write your transcripts. But for the most part, universities would rather see a letter than a number, okay? You can choose how that is weighted. And on some transcripts, you can actually choose to put that weighted scale down at the bottom of the transcript so that the university knows. Or you can choose not to. So Illinois doesn't give high school, wait, I want to address this, Jane.
Yeah.
Okay, see, perfect thing. So that's a great thing to put out there. What are we doing for those credits? So I need to make sure that those credits are done in high school. That's the perfect example for that. So you have to make a decision whether you want to go number grade or percentage grade. There have been very few, let's put it that way, in my experience, children who you want to put a number grade on. I will give you the perfect example is I have a very good friend of mine whose son applied for colleges at 15, and they wanted to put percentages on because he was applying for a very competitive department, and he had taken like physics with calculus and all these things, dual enrollment, and he had scored in the 99th percentile. So it was really important that it wasn't just an A that mom put on the transcript. It was a 99th percentile from a dual enrollment program. So that's 2 very different things. And then we can go from there. A general thing with transcripts as well is that you can write your own transcript. You can put it up on Word and figure it out however way you want to do it. You can also, if you're enrolled, you're going to get a transcript from major companies and things like that. But if you, what I use is called fast transcripts. It's the transcripts that are through HSLDA. The reason I like it is because I can pay $10 for a year and they keep the transcript online. And the reason is, this is now transitioning into college. Okay. When you start to talk about college applications, one of the biggest things and biggest hurdles for college applications for homeschooling parents and homeschooling families is that there are a lot of universities that the transcript has to come from what they say, an accredited source, okay? You cannot send it from your home address. So Fast Transcripts has an address through HSLDA, and they email a completely what they consider legitimate, not that your one at home is not legitimate, but it's just a way to kind of get it into the system. And so then they can just attack that. When you go to apply to colleges, this is why HSLDA and your local chapter are very important. Depending on the university, they might not have ever dealt with either a person who's done their own curriculum, so an eclectic homeschooler, or they might not have ever dealt with a child that's done like a dual enrollment issue, or most of them have dealt with AP, CLEP, CLT, those types of things. But, I've seen people kids, they won't even take the application because it's not coming from like an official, because they don't understand. That's illegal, by the way. That is illegal in all 50 states. They cannot tell you that your homeschool is not a legal source. But it has had many, many ramifications, things from NCAA eligibility to people that have been literally pulled from their university classes because, there was a document that somebody deems whatever. So you need to be, I like to say that before high school, you can teach frogs for 8 years. You really can. I mean, in the state of Florida, we can. But you could teach frogs in the state of Florida. We could teach frogs. As long as they learned a different thing about frogs for 8 years, Florida would take it. 9th grade, the whole kit and caboodle is now out the door. Even if your child is not planning life in academia after college. And this is why. In the United States, they need some sort of graduation type issue for high school. If they don't, they have to go through the GED program. And I will explain to you that the GED program is so much harder to get than anybody actually talks about. And it's so much easier to just write your own diploma. So, but they do need that, even for a VOTEC school, even for the convent, they do need to have some sort of paper says that they finished, okay? Now I want to talk about these subjects. Your child, unless required by law, does not have to do the traditional 4 years of everything that we did in school. So I would like my child to have 4 years of math. That's great. My child has horrible dysgraphia, and there is no way she's going to geometry. And geometry was in itself almost put us both in the grave, okay? So algebra, geometry, but I want her to have 4 years of math. So I want you guys to, if this is the case for you, and I don't want to take up a ton of time, there are lots of other resources for what we consider non-traditional types of classes for the sciences and the math, if the kids are not going into science and math. Now, if you feel very strongly, or if your husband feels very strongly that they need to get those 4 years of pre-cal, trig, and your child can do it, by all means do it. But don't block your idea of they have to be the 4 years of math. It needs to be the 4 years that we traditionally think of as math. My daughter is taking a year of accounting is her math, and she's doing, her other year is she did personal finance, and then she did business math. And I have wonderful resources for that for high school, and I used Homeschool Connections for the accounting. I cannot tell you how awesome Peggy is, Dr. Peggy Morrow, about accounting. That is like literally My daughter, Louisa, my older daughter, was planning on being a history major. She went to college, and her exact words to me were, I really want to like history when I graduate from college, so I'm not going to be a history major. It was bad. Like, she was like, there's no way. She's now an accounting major. She just got accepted into the accounting program at BC. So just don't think about that. Like, there are other things, especially when it comes to things like math and science. Science, there's some kid that can't do on higher level physics or high level chemistry could probably do a great anatomy or marine biology or things like that. So you have to kind of think about how that kind of changes. Now, what happens with college applications?
Oh,
okay. College applications, for the most part, are going to be individual in two ways. Number one, it's going to be individual because of where you're going. So if you have a child, like Jenny's Joey, who wants to go to a specific school, like, go to the school website, bring up what it is that they want you to have your child, and that's what your kid's going to do for high school, like X, Y, and Z. If your child doesn't have a particular school, but your husband graduated from a university really great, or did a program that was really great, this is the time to invest in them investing in their education. This is the time to have the kids start to do the research. The kids start to look into, what is it that I can learn to make my transition to college better for my career paths? Not every seventh grader is going to know that, but you have a generalization. If you're in a city, look at the 5 colleges closest to you and see what they require. Look at both state schools and private schools. Okay, there's lots of scholarships out there. There's lots of different things out there. You know, what are your goals, your needs, and your wants? As soon as your child hits 9th grade, any admissions counselor will talk to you. Any admissions counselor will talk to you. You call and you say, I need an admissions counselor. You need to tell them what state you're coming from. And you call and you say, I'm coming from the state of Florida. I have a 9th grader that is very interested in your engineering program. Tell me what I need to do. I will guarantee you, you will have 40 different schools stuff sent to your house within the next 2 weeks. It's that bad. People, college is a moneymaker. So think about it in that aspect. How do you make your child look the best for the school that they want to go to? So when it comes to a traditional four-year university, whether you're going to start at a community college for 2 years and then plan on transferring, what is it that they need for that? I haven't touched at all about dual enrollment. Dual enrollment is a totally different conversation. So just be aware that that is another option that we can get into. Somebody want to ask a question? So you've got the where they want to go and then what their future plans want to be. Also, don't forget that if you have a child who very much wants to do something that is either vo-tech or hands-on, or even not even that, like any child that wants to do an experience as part of their high school, we need internships. It is a beautiful thing to put on a transcript. You can give them as many credits as you need, depending on how many hours they had. My daughter decided that she wanted to finish college in December of her senior year. She was part of a performance troupe that performed and traveled all spring, and she was like, I'm not going to do any classes. So she finished in that. So I called her studio and I said, she needs to do something. And she's like, we are going to give her 6 credits of internships. And she was 6 hours. I mean, it was a lot of hours. She worked and she learned and she had that credit. And that was the 3 universities that she interviewed with. All 3 universities, that was their first question. What is this internship? So, you know, that's okay. You know, if you have a woodworker, a kid that's a woodworker and wants to find a carpenter, let them do it in high school. Let them have that experience in high school. It's not all about the classes in high school. Even the most, you know, brilliant of students at any college application, they want to see what else the kid is doing. You know, what extracurriculars, what other things they're doing, you know, service hours. In our state, for Bright Futures, which is the scholarship program here, they have to have 1,000 hours of community service throughout the 4 years of high school. So it's a lot of hours, a lot of hours. So, you know, all of that stuff. I think that's it. The only other thing that I wanted to point out is the one thing that I would be really careful with transcripts is languages. Universities do not like people to change languages when they go for course of study. They see it for some reason. It's not a personal thing, but they see it as a red flag. They don't understand that homeschoolers are just like that we like to study Spanish 1 year and French the next and German the next. And they're going to ask, now, if you have a child that studies 2 years of Spanish and then really wants to study, because they like languages, 2 years of French, that's fine. You don't have to stay in the language for the 4 years. Some universities will not even accept it as a credit if they don't have 2 years. Like, forget CLEPing, forget AP, forget anything. So that is a discussion to have with your 7th and 8th grader, is what language are you going to study in high school? We have ASL is considered a language. Okay, it is a language, but it's considered a language for transcript uses. Then when you get into language, you have to be really careful. Most universities will not take Rosetta Stone. Most universities will not take what we would consider an adult learning program for high school credit. And the reason is because what they're considering language prep is both writing and speaking. And those two things do not go together with most adult language scenarios. So if you want to have Rosetta Stone as a background, you know, to continue to app, just find a spine, find a book for them to do that they could, you know, do with. But Rosetta Stone, it is an Achilles heel in the homeschooling community within language. And now universities are really used to homeschoolers. Most universities that I have seen, even most Ivy League universities, have a particular advisor just for homeschoolers. And those advisors know so much. And they know how to analyze a transcript, and they know how to pick and choose exactly which things do not match from freshman year to junior year. So we need to be smart with that and be honest. And, you know, to this day, my oldest daughter cannot believe I actually gave her a C- for a philosophy class, and it totally screwed up her GPA. She wanted me to do it as a pass fail, and I was like, nope, you didn't work. You got a C-. So, but those types of things, I know, I'm like, yay. But those types of things are a consideration.
No.
That being said, don't set your child up for failure in high school. Don't set up your child for failure in high school. Do not try to pull something that you know they're not going to be able to finish. Don't, while they need to always be challenged, high school credits really matter. And this is the time that really it has to do with communication. It has to do with sitting down with your kid and being like, this is what works and this is what doesn't work. I'll give you a perfect example with my daughter, Anna Maria. So my 17-year-old Anna Maria, we have for the most part done Charlotte Mason, a lot of narrating and a lot of modern novelists. That's the book lists that I want for the most part. I've plugged in other things. This year, she came to me last year at this time and told me she did not want that approach for American history. She wanted a book. She wanted to answer the questions at the end of the book. She wanted to watch a lecture on homeschool connections. That was it. I was to grade the tests. My dyslexic. It takes 3 hours to read anything. Okay, honey, that's what we're gonna do. I bought her the book, Light to Our Nations. It is a excellent textbook. Homeschool Connections, those classes are fantastic. And she cried every day. It was so hard for her. She did it, she finished it, and she finished it with a B+. I mean, like, she worked her butt off. But she made the decision to go from one thing to the other. And we need to kind of know our kids and where they are when it comes to high school, because they just kind of, if not, it can just kind of steamroll. And when you start to steamroll high school, it's very hard to put the brakes on it. So sit back, do a framework. You don't have to, it's not in stone, but do a framework, a general framework. We're going to start with American history, and then we're going to go to modern, ancients, and I'm going to give them a credit for ancients, and then the next year they're going to get world history, and then senior year they're going to do their government and economics. Okay, general framework. Most high school students, in order to graduate, need at least 25 credits. So most high school students need 25 credits. Some states will require more, and some states will require a certain number of credits for certain things. There are states that require health. There are states that require civics. There are states that require algebra needs to be done in 9th grade, things like that. But if you put a framework, and then you see where your gaps are when you go to do a framework. And you also remember what Jenny said, which was don't block yourself out of something if they're really young. My 12-year-old finally got over the fact that he's not going to be a vet. But I wasn't going to not teach him math, because math is hard, whatever, because of that. But don't block yourself out of something because of your choices for high school. But the choices have to be made. It is very difficult to make the choices backwards and then try to make it up. Like where Jane is right now, she's got 2 years that she already has that framework. Now it's the next 2 years. And how do you put that framework? And so it's going to look differently for different kids. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you look at transcripts. Like Jenny was posting the transcripts of with different high schoolers. I'm happy to send that individually, but I only have one high schooler and I don't want to put her transcripts. But I'm happy to send that to you or to people individually. But look at the different transcripts. Look at the different catalogs, look at the Mother Divine Grace syllabus versus a Seton syllabus. Look at, things like that with the syllabi. And then think about how your child is going to do it mostly independent, which is another huge key for by the time that they are in these grades. The reality is that is what a college is expecting. That by the time that they are graduating from high school, these 4 years that you've put in a framework are 4 years that they've, for the most part, been very independent of, not that you can't teach them math, but an independent learner, an independent person that is now going into the next framework. I'm just going to say one little brief thing about SATs and testing, and then I'm done. Prepare for testing a lot earlier than you think you need to prepare for testing. Look at testing in 8th and 9th grade, because most prepping for testing is going to be done in 9th or 10th, for testing to be done in 10th or 11th, if you have a child that's going to a 4-year university. Most universities, when you first apply, and most applications are done in the fall of their senior year, they're going to ask why there is not a test score on here, and then a test score appears in February. Yes, that's a huge one. That's a huge one, Annalisa, taking that SAT 9. So think about testing before you think you need to think about testing, especially those of you that don't have to do anything. You go from not having to do anything to, oh my gosh, now my kid needs to learn how to test. So I did put in that SAT thread, I talked a little bit about the fact that they need to prepare for their strengths and their weaknesses. my older daughter, Louisa, had an almost perfect score on her verbal in SAT. And then math was the bane of her existence. But we worked really, really hard to get it up to a good, not an excellent. It was never going to be excellent, but it was a good. But think of SATs as just one branch of that college application. It doesn't necessarily, you can apply a lot of schools now. You do not have to even look at the SATs. Or the ACTs or the CLTs or whatever standardized testing. There are schools out there that do that. But just think of it as one branch. For most of the big Ivy Leagues, the big Catholic schools, definitely any of the military academies or anything like that, that SAT is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So the SAT is the way that they, for some reason, kind of justify the scores on the transcripts. For most kids, it doesn't equal one or the other, but especially for homeschoolers. So that's SAT. And that's it.
Cool. Let me go back to a few points and fill in a few details that that I just marked. So I was like, oh yeah, I want to make sure that we say this, and then we'll see what else people want to share. And I saw your chat, so we'll get into those topics as well. But excellent information, very, very helpful. Totally agree about checking what your state requires, getting in on the HSLDA right at the bat. I did want to point out that every state has graduation requirements, but they might not apply to homeschoolers. So make sure you look carefully. In Texas, homeschoolers do not have to follow the state graduation requirements at all. We don't have to even look at them if we don't want to. So the advice that I was given in our state was pick a couple colleges that might feasibly be ones that your kid would consider and see what their admission requirements is and use that as your guide. So I think that that's an important point to make, is to don't wait to check those colleges. Even if you have no idea, just pick the state school that's the biggest and pick a private school near you. Just look at something. And that way you can, again, like I said at the beginning, not block off something for your kids, not close that door too early. So yes, look at your state, but some states doesn't matter. We can put whatever we want. Because of the different requirements and I loved that Mimi was saying, make sure they're only doing the amount of work that a credit would be. I think we tend to pile a lot on our homeschoolers because they're capable at this age, and because we have more time. It just takes less time when you're not in a school environment. And so be careful with that, especially with the English. As a former high school English teacher, I will tell you that there's just no way you can cover all the things you want to cover in English in a credit. Like even in the public schools, I did it. I tried to, and I couldn't. I have heard of parents giving 2 credits in a year for something English related, but when they do that, it's not usually favorable to the state schools, but it is to the private schools, and they name those courses very carefully. So for example, a freshman class might be, oh, my child took comparative world literature. And then my child took a semester of writing essays and something, like it's very specific. It's not just English, it's not just composition, it's not just literature. So that is possible, but again, Mimi's right. Not every school is that's gonna be a positive, and that takes the place of something else they might wanna see. And so you keep that in mind too. It's like, if you pile on the credits and you give that to a college, they're going to go, this is not, like, they may even just put it to the side and say, I cannot believe that they have 40 credits in high school. That's impossible. I mean, it is technically impossible, but we do sometimes give our kids too much work that it would look like that. So be careful there. What else did I want to say? Backing right up at the beginning, I always get the question, how do I get my kid a diploma? And then, well, what's a transcript? Those are 2 different documents, just to be baseline here. A diploma is the pretty certificate that you put on your wall and no one ever asks for, ever. Very, very, well, not ever. Okay, there's some jobs that's what they would want to see, is that you have a diploma. And so it's important to have something. For the most part, just print out a pretty piece of paper that says, imitate something online. The transcript is what lists all the courses and all the grades that your student took and the credits for each of those. So just to differentiate and make sure we know what we're talking about there. And there are transcript services that will print that, that will compile that for you and make it official. You're still gathering all the information though, and turning that in. It's not like they're going to just figure it out. And then just, the differences between state and private schools going into college is, from my research, pretty significant in what their expectations are, both in what your kid's doing in high school and in what they want on the application. So I wanted to point out, for example, I have a friend who created 2 separate transcripts. One transcript was for the state schools that just wanted, the public schools that just wanted, it looked as close as a public school, high school transcript as she could make it. And then a separate transcript that was more descriptive for those private schools that were more interested in, that they took comparative world literature and Catholic theology, when the other one didn't, like, that would be bad. They just want to see English, and they want to see, they could put a theology or philosophy class, and she named the classes differently on different transcripts. There's nothing wrong with that. It's still the same content. It's just formatting it in a way that helps. Some schools will ask for additional information. There's places so there's something called the Common App, which is really popular now among state schools. And it's one application that you fill out, and then you can send it to multiple colleges, right? So there's addendums to that and places that you can add things that are optional. Some of them require various extra things for homeschoolers. A lot of private schools require the extra stuff for homeschoolers. So they require a book list and a course description for every course that your kid took. So they want to see, basically, like if you were, looking at a college catalog and looking at that course description and what materials you used in that class, those private schools want to see that. They're going to ask for it. So keep track.
That is why it is extremely important that even if you don't do paperwork, Jenny, like you in Texas, keep a syllabus for each class they take.
Even if it's just a piece of notebook paper and you handwrite as much as you can when they take that class, make sure you have that information, because by their senior year, you're going to forget the freshman year textbook and what they used, and you're going to leave something out. So I did want to point that out, in that difference between what's required in the application. Just collect all the information you possibly can, and then that way when you get to that point, you have it and can reference it. The other big difference between state and private schools from a financial standpoint is that the private schools offer tons more scholarships. So when you're looking at prices and you're saying, well, this is what the state school would be, and this up here above the screen is what the private school would be, remember, this number is going to come down quite a bit with like automatic scholarships. And there's many situations where it comes a lot closer than you would think. So don't rule something out without fully investigating what's expected. A lot of those scholarships are based on SAT scores. So even though it might not be required for admission, that's how they determine what level of scholarship your kid's going to get. So yes, the tests aren't going away. They are important. As I said in the thread today, even Texas A&M, which is not, as of a year from now, knocking out the automatic admission based on SAT score, they're still expecting it to be included for their review, because more colleges are moving to a holistic review, which is great. Because in Texas, we have state schools, the top 10% of high school graduates get in automatically. So there's like the first tier. And then the second tier was SAT score. And if it was high enough, like this year, it was 1360 in A&M, then automatic admission. They're getting rid of that, and they're looking at holistically. So like Mimi said, they want to see the transcript, but they also want to see, did your kids get involved in extracurriculars? Did they volunteer? Did they have a job? It's a resume. So keep track of that stuff too. Figure out, and you can, again, we're homeschoolers and we know how to count things as other things. So like your kid is, helping at a co-op that your younger kids are going to. That's volunteer hours. Just get the leader of the co-op to sign off on it. Figure out a way that you can recognize them for the things that they're doing. I'm not saying add too much more, it is good to add some things to have them have that experience. Okay, what else? Just a few things, the extras. Oh, let the kids research the colleges and the careers that they want. When I was in 8th grade, that was our research project. We had to research a career and what education it would take to get there. So, I mean, fold that into your curriculum, have them do that kind of thing, because that is really, really important. And then we mentioned really briefly NCAA and military academies. If you think your kid is going to be an NCAA athlete or want to get into a military academy, I cannot help you. You have to go with an enrolled program that is accredited and get a specific help. Call HSLDA. They will tell you exactly what to do. Their requirements are extraordinarily stringent on admission to those programs, above and beyond whatever college it is. So make sure that you look at that, because that's super important.
And there are Facebook groups, like if you are interested in that, for NCAA athletes, and then there are Facebook groups for Division I athletes, Division II athletes, Division III athletes. It has to do with money, it has to do with what they have to do. And like the military academy, I have met a lot of people in my life that have homeschooled, and not one of them has ever done it without being fully enrolled in an accredited program. Yes, it's a bias. Yes, it stinks, but don't do that to your kid. If that is even at the back of their mind, that is where you should be going. You need to have a fully accredited program, because they aren't even going to look at that transcript.
Yeah, it's unfortunate right now, and I know HSLDA is working on that kind of stuff, but it's just, it is what it is, because, the reality is we all know that there are homeschoolers out there who don't really homeschool. They have their kids, they might read some books, they might hand them a textbook, but they're not making the effort to really educate their kids. It's sad. It's the rare occasion, but because it happens, they're not necessarily going to trust a grade that mom gave them, right? Because they're going to look at that transcript and go, oh, they got all A's. Well, of course they did. Mom graded all their work and decided to give them all A's just on a whim. They made it up. There's no credibility there. So that's where the standardized tests come in. That's where if you want to go the AP or the CLEP test towards the end of high school and get them to test out a credit. We'll get to dual enrollment, because I think that is a good topic, but let me run through your questions backwards, and then so that I don't, because some of these are a little easier. Number of credit hours for volunteering. I don't think you can count volunteering as credit. You can count an internship if it's a specific job that they're not getting paid for as an internship. But as far as just volunteering, you put that on the supplementals that explains what extracurricular activities and jobs they would have held.
You want to go the internship route? It's the same rules apply as the credit for the hours. So 180 hours for
one credit.
For one credit. If there were, think of it this way, that if they're doing an hour a week, that's one credit. If they're doing 2 hours a week, that's 2 credits. Think of it that way. At 180 hours is what I'm saying. If you're doing 180 hours, 5 hours a week is 1 credit. So think 5 Monday through Friday. So 5 hours a week would be 1 credit. 10 hours. My daughter, who got the 6 credits, was working literally all day long, 8 to 4, doing the internship. So think of it the same way that you would do a credit for a class for an internship.
Yes. Excellent point. Excellent point. Should your transcript have a supplement attached that includes the class description, or wait until it's requested? Don't send in an application without talking to an admission counselor first and ask that question. Most of them are going to say wait, but some of them are going to say send it. So, and it will get kicked out if they require it and you don't put it in there. So talk to the admission counselor first. They're, like Mimi said, almost every school has an admission counselor dedicated to homeschoolers. They are available by email and phone, and they want to talk to you. They like homeschoolers for the most part. And so they want to help you. So I would absolutely check on those colleges. Annalisa, did we cover annotating transcripts? Okay, I think you said that. Yes, you could take the SAT 9, you can take, because Mimi made a good point. In Texas, I don't have to test my kids annually. So they take very few standardized tests. So I started them on the PSAT 8, 9 in 8th grade. They took the PSAT for 8th grade, 9th grade, 8, 9, and then they took the PSAT 10, and then they're going to do the SAT 11, 5 times. I don't care how many times. We're also taking the CLT because my kids are doing better on that. And if they want to hit a private college, the private colleges are more taking the CLT, also because all the SATs are being canceled, that CLT is becoming more accepted. Classical learning test, it's done completely online. That is actually a detriment to some kids, even though it could be a benefit to others. Yeah, I would take as many of those early tests, and the Duke SAT in 7th grade. They even have a Duke program that's younger than that now. I think it's 4th or 5th grade. So you can look into all those things. If your kid is a good tester and they're gifted and you think they can excel, yes, let them be successful. And then the dual enrollment stuff. So here's my knowledge of dual enrollment, and then we can talk. You guys can share and continue to ask questions. The motivation for doing dual enrollment as a homeschooler is twofold. One is, like everybody else, to get the college credit, because you get a high school credit and a college credit at the same time. But as a homeschooler, it also means your kid is getting a grade from an outside instructor that is reputable. Because guess what? Homeschool moms aren't reputable. It's just the way it is. So if dual enrollment is something you want to consider, you have to choose a class that your kid will get an A in. Do not choose a class that they will get a B or a C or a D. Choose the class they can get the A in. A lot of community colleges offer dual enrollment and open it up to homeschoolers. Some counties are, where I am, some counties are free, and some counties you pay a discounted tuition rate. Keep in mind they're in a classroom with public school kids and some college kids. So it's also a maturity level, and when your kid is ready to be around those other kids and their influences. Another growing trend is for a college, for someone to enroll in a dual enrollment program, you have to take an introductory orientation of some sort that includes all sorts of things that Catholics would not want their 9th graders to hear. So look into those things. That is one reason I am waiting for my very college-minded kid to do that. There's actually a few places that offer dual enrollment online now, which is super cool. Franciscan University has it through Homeschool Connections, and we're looking into that if they'll ever offer something that's a little more not booky. They're offering biology finally, so, but we're not in a biology year. But that's a growing program, but there's lots of online options as well, so your kid wouldn't necessarily have to go to the college to be in that situation.
There's another very positive thing for dual enrollment that sometimes people forget. 1 semester of college dual enrollment is 1 year of high school credits. Yes. And that makes a very big difference for things like language. So if you have a kid that hasn't done languages and is a junior or senior and can dual enroll, they can take Spanish 1 in the fall and Spanish 2 in the spring. And that's 2 high school years of Spanish. So any semester counts as 1 full year of high school.
Right.
The other major advantage is that it is the exact same credit as an AP. So they can do the dual enrollment without the test. So if you have a kid that's not a tester, you can do it that way. And the dual enrollment looks really cool if they continue to do that and do well. But I could not stress enough what Jenny says about make sure it's the class they're going to get an A in. And be very careful, make sure you check Rate My Professor, especially if they're going in for an English class.
Yes, to rule out the kind of liberal leaning, scary kind of stuff. Yeah. Rate My Professor is a great resource to make sure that your kid's going to, get a good fit in a professor. And that dual enrollment class is going to have to take priority over pretty much everything else because they have to get the A. So make sure that when you plan to do that, you consider that with all their other assignments and all of their other credits for that year in coursework. So
Is the emphasis on make sure you get an A in that?
the emphasis is because, as it was explained to me, is because if they can't hack it in a dual enrollment class, then it discredits all your other grades that are A's.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Is that what you understand, Mimi?
Yeah, because it's an A coming from somebody that's not mom.
Got it.
Yeah. And the reverse on that, and it happened to one of my daughter's bestest friends, who mom didn't really check his grades, and he flunked. And that's it. He was done with community college.
Mm-hmm.
If you flunk in the state of Florida, if you flunk a community college class in high school, you are automatically withdrawn from being able to apply to the community college.
Harsh.
Very harsh, a very harsh lesson. But that dual enrollment kind of privilege is one of those things where they're kind of like, it's your call to put them in. And so, you know, we did not go the dual enrollment route because my daughter did not feel, she went to an orientation and she was like, I don't feel comfortable doing this at 16, 17. We live in a very large city, and she was like, this is all ages, all walks of life, and she was like, and it was an introductory English class, and she was like, this is crazy. So she just didn't feel comfortable doing it. But we've had close friends whose kids start dual enrollment in the state of Florida. You can take one class a year starting in 7th grade. So we've had people that have done it because we have a lot of satellite locations. So like one of our locations, like in Doral, Jenny, has like literally 50 students. So she signed up and took all the classes that were offered at Doral.
Okay. Because
there were no other students. So maybe that's another option too when it comes to a community college. I know that they're really pushing to see if they can get some online. It's causing an issue for the fall because dual enrollment students can't do online. And yet those classes are the ginormous classes that they want all online. So it's causing a huge issue here.
Yeah. The English and history that we're registered for in the fall are both meeting in local high schools. So I think I'm assuming it will only be juniors and seniors they'll be with.
That is an excellent. Wow, that's awesome.
And of course, and mine will be juniors, and they're very well formed, so I don't have any concerns about the influences. And my understanding is those are generally going to be good students they'll be in classes with.
Right. Yes.
So
and that's
I don't
what I
have
was going to.
Concerns about formation issues.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's another thing about the A is that keep in mind that the dual enrollment is designed in high school is designed for the accelerated kid.
Yeah.
You know, a counselor in high school is not going to put a flunky into a dual enrollment class because it's going to be, you know, it's at a higher level. It's harder. They're going to put the kids who can succeed. So that's what we do too, is put the kids in there that can succeed.
One item I will share from my experience with this, which is so far just with the application and enrollment process, is that there are many references to ask your guidance counselor. And as Jenny pointed out, that's you. And so it was a huge learning curve for me going through this 20-step application process. But the admissions counselor is your best friend. So I was just, and they got to know me, they got to know my kids. I was just calling them all the time with questions, and they're fine with that.
Yeah. You know, I have a great story about that. When my daughter went to go apply to Benedictine, we got to know the admissions counselor. We had gotten to know the admissions counselor, and Benedictine has like she's one poor child, one admissions counselor for like 27 states, including Florida. I mean, it's crazy because most of their students come from the Midwest. So the outliers get one counselor. And we were trying to do the money game and where is she going to go to school and is it going to be happening? And I called her and I said, she wants to go there, but we cannot figure out this money. And she was like, give me 24 hours. And then she called me back and she was like, call again. Tell them what's going on. We want her here. Let's figure this out. So they really, truly get to know your kids, and your kids are going to be awesome too. So like, just work with them and ask them, and then go from there. And I would say for the majority of that, those admissions counselors, they want those homeschoolers. They know exactly what they're getting. And I went to the IHI, I only went to one conference, the IHM conference in Virginia, when my daughter was a junior. And they had a big college presentation, and the admissions counselors kept coming up and coming up and coming up. We want your kids, please, blah, da, 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 da. And then they left. For the very last person they left, and the president of Belmont Abbey got up and he was like, they all sent their admission counselors. I'm here to tell you I want your kid. And we were all like, and he's like, I'm the president of the university. Give me 10 minutes to tell you why I want my Catholic homeschoolers in my school. And we were all like, and he's like, yeah, it's nice, admissions counselors, but they really are there to make it work for you. They don't want your transcript to just get put in a pile. They want your transcript to be looked at.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that is so good to keep in mind is that homeschoolers overall statistically do incredibly well in college because they're independent learners at home. They're doing a lot of work on their own. They're managing their schedule a little bit more than the average public school kid. And so on average, statistically, that's why colleges are like, yeah, we'll give you a shot because we know that you came from a different kind of learning environment, because it's a learning environment that more closely mimics college than it does the, 1 hour, 7 classes in one day, 1 hour a piece, because college is different. The other thing I wanted to make sure to mention, or before we close up, or if we'll see if there's any more questions, is that there is a wonderful push now to provide solid information on the Catholic universities that are available out there and that are striving to be truly Catholic. The Newman Guide, you may have heard of, but I know some people still have not. The Newman Guide is it's a guide, but it's an organization too that researches and analyzes Catholic colleges and provides lots of information for parents and potential applicants to help discern if that is a good fit for their kid. The Newman Guide has specific requirements that they say make the school desirable to Catholics. And so it is a wonderful resource to look up and see if that's a good fit for your family or for your kid. And again, they love homeschoolers. They love Catholic homeschoolers, and that's a really positive thing if you're wanting to make sure your kid has a better chance of being in an environment that will support their faith. There are never guarantees, and there's parties at every school, and your kid could fade away. But I want to make sure everybody knows that resource is there, as well as lots of resources online for homeschoolers. I signed up for a webinar talk on Saturday that Catherine O'Brien is giving about the change in SAT scores, and she is I forget the name of her company. I'll add it in the chat, in the group, but she's a college counselor for homeschoolers. That's what she does. So you can hire her to help you get your kid into college. There's people like Lee Binns who have tons of information and resources on how to get your kid into college. Jean Burke, there's lots of SAT prep specifically designed for homeschoolers. Scholarship people that will help you find scholarships if you can't afford it and advise you. So there's help out there is what I'm saying, both free and paid, if you need that assistance and if you need those resources. Yes, so Benedictine College that Mimi is talking about is the Catholic college in Kansas. What else is in here? Yeah, Benedictine. So what other questions you guys have?
You're more than welcome to call me up. You can message me. She's happy to talk to anybody. She's like the official sponsor of I want to get people to this university, so hit me up.
And I think it's been really cool. A lot of the universities have been doing like online meet and greet and sessions for high schoolers to try to get them interested. So if you're thinking of some colleges and you're like, I wonder if they're doing anything, check their websites, because my daughter's attended a couple of those that are just where they present. It's a Zoom call where they present their college and why you might want to go there to see if it's a good fit. So those are things, especially right now, to look into, because those are great opportunities. Yes, Jenny, I will list the resources I talked about. When I post this call in the Facebook group, I'll list them in the comments. That way we have them all in one place to get some of those out there. What other questions do you guys have? I mean, it is a big topic, but if there's any little details we can fill in before we close up.
Okay.
But this is awesome. I'm so glad we were able to have these chats. And, you know, if you need more assistance, Jane, you can pop in the group and ask. I hope that you find better fit for your boy, because that's the key, right? In high school, we have to kind of figure out how they can be successful, both in high school and after high school. Whatever that path may lead them, is to prepare them to be successful, because that's all that we want as moms. It does take a lot of thought and effort and planning on our part, because we're doing all of that, and they're still very young and not able to, you know, take that over yet. But I'm letting my daughter plan her senior year mostly, and she's very excited about that.
That's what we did. That's what Anna Maria did too.
But yeah, so
My daughter's a junior at U of I, and she went through the school with no problems, but I learned watching the requirements that the school have that are above what the state has, and said he needs 2 years of science. He doesn't need chemistry. He's had physics. Now he just needs biology.
Yep.
So
right. Yes, it's so important to look at those college and what they're asking for, so that you know and not be surprised. That's the goal of this call, is that we, you know, I know, especially having Selena on here, this is great. You've got a younger one, not close, not there yet, not up to high school or even higher middle school yet, but you cannot think about, you know, I was gonna say, you can't think about high school too early. Yes, you can. If you have a kindergartner, turn off. You shouldn't have watched this. But it does a great service to our kids, and it gives us a lot more peace if we can prepare and at least be aware of some of these things before we face them. You know about college applications before you get to your senior year. Know about SATs before you get to your junior year. You know about transcripts before you have to write one, and before you have to create classes, so you know why you're creating and what that's going to look like. So since it's late, I'm going to close this. I know we had some people drop off because it's so late, but this was a great conversation. I'm so grateful to you ladies for being here.
and I appreciate all the words of wisdom.
Well, there are varying perspectives in the homeschooling world, and you can always kind of seek out different opinions and discern, you know, what fits, right? Our next set of calls is going to be Saturday and Sunday, and we're going to talk more specifically K through 12, designing your own curriculum, both what that looks like as far as picking materials and how you figure out what to teach. And then also on Sunday, scheduling that out, lesson planning and scheduling out throughout the year. And practically speaking, I have all these books now. What do I do with them? So I hope you guys or some of you would join us for that one as well. Good night.
Thank you.